Hello class, welcome to HI 321, World War II History. I'm recording these lessons in my study at home, and as you look behind me you'll see that I'm a big fan of World War II. Some of you that know me, that have taken classes with me before would attest to that. And so it's my desire that the majority of these lectures will be in person on campus. However, the situation with COVID-19 and everything has kind of caused the faculty and staff to kind of shift gears, as you are all, I'm sure, well aware of. So the idea is that these lectures will be supplementary. They will be in case somebody can't make it to class, they can jump online and watch these videos. I'll try to be pretty timely about posting them. There'll be 7 of them, at least 7 of them. And so hopefully next Monday night we'll be together in person. I'm not sure what classroom yet. I'm recording this video on 22 August, so first night of class will be the 31st. And so I want to encourage you to, if you haven't already purchased the textbook, I would like you to get that ASAP. It's by Stokesbury, and it's entitled A Short History of World War II. And you can pick up a copy more than likely in the campus bookstore, or you can get it on Kindle, on Amazon, or whatever. But you're going to need the book. It's my desire that you enjoy this class. College work can be drudgery, and for some people, history is about as exciting as watching the grass grow. Not for me, though. I have a passion for history, particularly military history, and it's my desire that you'll not only enjoy this course, but also succeed. And so in order to accomplish that, I want to go over the syllabus. I want to go over some preliminary things that you'll be expected to accomplish in this course. And so if you would bring up the slides for this class, and you can bring those up on your device, whether it's your iPad or your laptop, what have you, and sort of follow along the slides as I talk. I'm not as sophisticated technically to figure out how to video myself teaching and show you the slides too. So hopefully one of these days I'll take a class from Brother Sultanic and learn that. Slide number 2, if you would. So read the assigned readings, the textbook. There's only one textbook for this class that's required, but I expect you to read it. There's many modules. Of the 7 modules, there'll be handouts, usually for every single module, and I expect you to read the handouts. Participate in class. Typically in any given classroom setting, there's anywhere from 4 to 5 people who will tend to dominate the discussion. They'll tend to do all the talking. When I call on somebody to come up with an answer, it's usually the same 4 to 5 people that are always answering. And so I would rather have 20 or 25 people, however many will end up in this class, dominating the classroom discussion versus just a handful. So when we are in person meeting together on Monday nights, please participate. Study all post-lesson note sheets. There are 7 lecture note sheets that I provided for you in Canvas that you can print out and fill those out as the lecture is progressing, or we'll go over them together at the end so that you have the right answers. Handle. For nearly every class period, I'll have both primary and secondary sources for you to handle, view, and experience. Part of the participation requirement is that you take a look at these items. Occasionally I'll include an image of something that I brought into class that will be on a quiz. So make sure that you come to the display table for sort of a mini question and answer time. And with that, because of the situation that we're in with COVID, I will have a box of rubber gloves on the display table, and when I have something up there that I want you to take a look at, you'll be required to, don a pair of those rubber gloves, handle the hat, the weapon, the whatever it is, and then as soon as you're done with it, take the rubber gloves off and dispose of those, and of course don't touch the item again. I'm also going to ask that you don't take any pictures with your iPhones of any of the equipment items that I bring into class, especially anything Nazi related. For obvious reasons, don't want that stuff on Facebook, obviously, and giving the wrong impression. And so I'll have a box of medical exam gloves for you to handle the items. And if you have any kind of a latex allergy or sensitivity, then the gloves are probably not going to be a good idea. So look at slide 3 with me, please. There's a difference between, I mentioned it a minute ago, primary and secondary sources and tertiaries. Those are the 3 sources that are used in historiography, or the study of history. And so let's look at each one. Go to slide 4. Primary sources are contemporary accounts or physical evidence which are written or created during the time period under study or shortly thereafter. Things like personal journals, diaries, memoirs, recorded or written speeches would all be examples of primary sources. Newspaper articles, clothing, pottery, artwork, things like that, weapons, and so forth. All those would be examples of primary sources. Slide 5. A great example of a primary source is an ancient helmet that was discovered in the late 1800s, and you can see this on the slide. It actually belonged, this very helmet, and this is what is so remarkable, this helmet belonged to the famous Athenian general Miltiades. And if you've ever studied ancient military history, you've no doubt come across the Battle of Marathon, which was fought in 490 BC, and it's one of the seminal battles of Western civilization. And so this battle was between the Persians and the Athenians. And now, how do we know it's Miltiades' helmet? Well, because if you look real closely at the picture, you'll see that he inscribed his name on it. Slide 6. A secondary source interprets or analyzes, assigns value to primary sources. History books, documentary films are good examples of secondary sources. Slide 7. A tertiary source, those are distillations or collections of primary and secondary sources. Things like dictionaries, guidebooks, encyclopedias, bibliographies, those would be examples of tertiary sources. I would encourage you to go into Canvas, and there's a video that I included under the section entitled Helpful Items for Successful Writing, I believe is the title of that module. But there's a video in there on primary, secondary sources, and I would encourage you to watch that. Slide number 8, please. Make sure that you only use in this class the Turabian method for your citations, or Chicago Manual of Style. For your footnotes, I'm going to require you to give footnotes for pretty much every writing assignment that you do. And so just make sure that they are done in accordance with the Chicago Manual of Style or the Turabian method. Slide 9. Because I only have you in class once a week on Monday nights, there's going to be a lot of information packed into that 2-hour class period. Now, don't let that discourage you. One of the things that I think is going to be a benefit to you guys is the fact that the fall semester has been split into Term A and Term B, meaning that for the majority of you, you should only be taking 3 to 4 classes for each term. And so that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to handle my class. I've been told a lot over the years that my class is tough, it's difficult. Some of you have had me as an instructor before, so you know my style. I do tend to bring to class sort of a shotgun approach where I just regurgitate tons of information. And so don't let that discourage you. And as you're looking at this slide, slide number 9, I would ask you, how many of you have ever been invited to a party, a fellowship perhaps, maybe a children's birthday party where they had a piñata, right? Well, if you haven't, the way it works is somebody gets blindfolded, usually a child. They're handed a club or a stick or a bat, and they're, somebody spins them around in circles to kind of make them dizzy, disorient them. And then somebody else lowers that piñata to the level of where if they swung that stick or bat, it would strike the piñata. And once they strike the piñata, what comes bursting out? Candy, right? Good stuff. And it showers candies all around, and all the kids love it. Now, if you're paying attention in class, think of my class, the information transfer, sort of like that piñata. And with a piñata, if you're standing around close to it, you're paying attention, then you stand to gain a lot of candy. This course is like a piñata. Each week, each class will be like a giant World War II filled piñata that breaks open at 7 p.m. And if you're paying attention, you will catch some of the knowledge that is spewed out like a shotgun blast. Slide 10. As Paul said in Romans 11 verse 3, Romans 1 verse 13, I would not have you ignorant, brethren. Now, I wouldn't have you ignorant either regarding what's expected of you during this course. So, there will be 7 quizzes. There'll be 50 points each, 25 questions each, and they will be timed. Now, you'll have a week to do the quiz. Once you start the quiz, you have 30 minutes to get it done. You can't start and stop and all that. You really only have one shot at the quiz as well. And so make sure that you're prepared for it. The quizzes are open book, open notes. You can throw the slides up. You can even replay the lectures when you're taking the quiz. Doesn't matter to me. You'll be required to do an annotated bibliography. That will be sort of equivalent to your midterm. And the instructions for how to do that are in Canvas. You'll be required to write a research paper, which will be due the final week of class, and then you'll be required to complete 4 project assignments, each that's worth, I believe, 25 points. And so the entire total of all those assignments equals, if you were to get 100 on every single one of them or maximize it, you'd get 1,000 points. And so that's the maximum number of points you can earn in this course is 1,000 points. I would also like to solicit maybe 3 to 4 men, some volunteers, or ladies. Doesn't have to be just the guys. But I need a group that's going to be consistent to when we are meeting together in class that can help me schlep or tote or carry, transfer things out of my vehicle into the classroom. Many times during this course, I'll bring in literally tons of stuff for you to look at and see. And it's really hard for me to do it all myself, especially if I'm bringing in one of these mannequins that you can kind of see behind me there. So I'll bring those in so you can see what the actual uniform items looked like for that particular enemy combatant during the Second World War. So if I could get some volunteers that say, yes, Brother Wells, I'll help you, and I'll do it all 7 weeks, that would be great. So that's going to mean that you're going to need to show up a little bit early for class and maybe stay a few minutes after class so you can help me take it back to the car. But I would really appreciate that. So you can email me and say, yep, I'm your man, I'm your woman, and that would be great. So with all that preliminary stuff out of the way, I would encourage you to look at your syllabus very closely. It breaks down the course schedule. It tells you what we'll be covering each of the 7 weeks. It'll give you the assignments that you have that are due that week. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, there'll be 7 discussion boards that you'll be required to complete as well as the 7 quizzes. And so each week you'll be assigned a discussion board. You'll have a week to complete that. In each one of them, it's you writing a response to a question or a situation that I post, and you'll be required to spend at least 300 words on that assignment, and you must cite your work. You must use footnotes, and you must cite your work. So, by the way, our library on campus is filled with World War II material, so you shouldn't have any struggles with finding good source material for your written assignments. Slide 11, if you would, please. Let's go ahead and begin now with the first module here. And I've entitled it The Origins of the War. So World War II combined the technological innovation of the 20th century with ideological fanaticism. That's probably the best way to sum it up. World War II combined, it was a mixture of the technological innovation that was because of the Industrial Revolution of the 20th century with ideological fanaticism. And this combination is why World War II was so costly in human suffering and loss. Not that the Great War, World War I, wasn't costly, but far more people died in the Second World War than did people in the First World War or the Great War. In fact, more people died in World War II than in any other conflict before or since that time. It's estimated that approximately 60 to 85 million people perished during World War II. Think of that. That's over 2.5% of the world's population at that time. Slide 12. Next thing I want to talk about, some interesting facts. Many times throughout this course, we will refer to terms like battle, operation. You'll hear that from me a million times probably, or you'll read those two words, battle, operation. They're not the same thing. Operation Typhoon, Operation Neptune, Operation Cobra, Operation Vesarabung, Operation Ardennes Counteroffensive, Operation Anvil, Operation Dragoon, Sledgehammer, Roundup, Overlord. There's tons of them. Now, we'll not cover every one of those, so don't get too nervous. And then there's another term that we use, battle. The Battle of Midway, the Battle of the Ardennes Forest, the Battle of the Hurtgen Forest, the Battle of France, the Battle of Britain, the Battle of Stalingrad, etc., etc., etc. And so it'll help you understand things better if you know the difference between the terms battle and operation. A battle could be, an operation is usually comprised of several battles. The war, in its totality, was comprised of hundreds of operations, thousands of battles. Another thing, there were different theaters when you think about the Second World War. Different theaters of operations, as they were known, geographically. For example, the ETO, the European Theater of Operations, that had to do with Europe. The CBI, the China-Burma Indian Theater, a very neglected part of World War II study. The MTO, Mediterranean Theater of Operations. That would be North Africa, Egypt, etc. And then, of course, the PTO, the Pacific Theater of Operations. And so we're going to cover all those during this course. Maybe not the CBIs so much, but the other ones, excuse me, for sure. Next slide. Slide 14. Any study of warfare involves the use of unfamiliar jargon. Unless you're a military history major like myself, or had been in the military like I had been for 25 years. I'm assuming that some of what you hear, some of what you read, for a lot of you will be unfamiliar jargon. It's almost impossible to pick up a World War II book, history book, and not encounter terms like this: division, and that has to do with a number of men. Platoon also has to do with a number of soldiers. Battle group, etc. So I believe you have a Canvas handout that kind of helps you with that. Slide 15. Here's a list of some unfamiliar terms that you will definitely encounter during this course. Things like Luftwaffe, that's a German word for Air Force. Panzerschreck, that's a German word for a bazooka. Panzer, German for tank, and so forth and so forth. So, slide 16. What caused World War II? Let's talk about the origins of this cataclysmic conflict. Now, no one incident, as you're looking at this chart, no one incident caused World War II. There were several contributing factors that sort of led up to it. Now, as to the official start date, there are various opinions depending on who you ask. Some would say 1931 was the day that World War II, or the year that the Second World War started, because that's when Japan invaded Manchuria in what's known as the Mukden Incident. Some would say 1937, when Chinese troops fired on Japanese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge on July the 8th. Most, however, would say that September the 1st, 1939, was the day that World War II started, because that's the day that the German military, or the Wehrmacht, invaded Poland. Now, some, I would hope not, but I would think that a small minority of people, if you ask them when World War II started, they might say December 7th, 1941. Of course, they would be wrong, but some might say that. Slide 17. After the armistice of World War I in 1918, world leaders sat down and signed off on a document known as the Treaty of Versailles. Japan, and Germany in particular, were miffed at the results of that treaty. They were upset. It must be remembered that Germany did not start the Great War. The country of Serbia actually started World War I when a Serbian national named Gavrilo Princip assassinated Austria-Hungary's Archduke, a man by the name of Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie. He stepped out off a curb and shot them to death in their car on June the 28th, 1914. World War I ushered in the age of industrialized killing. With, for example, on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, which began July the 1st, 1916, just on the first day of that battle, nearly 20,000 British soldiers were killed on the first day. Now, because 135 were killed in the first hour. And because of this mass scale of industrialized killing, it was hoped that the Versailles Treaty would prevent another World War I, would prevent another terrible war by crippling Germany's ability militarily, territorially, financially, politically to make war again. But really, in reality, the Treaty of Versailles, it only set the stage for World War II. Next slide. Slide 18. The terms of the Treaty of Versailles essentially involved four things: land, military, blame, and money. Slide 19. Regarding land, Germany was forbidden to place troops in the Rhineland. The Rhineland was a 50-mile stretch of land that was adjacent to the country of France. Also, Germany was forced to cede or to give up the Polish corridor, the land between Germany and East Prussia, to Poland. Germany had to give the industrialized Saar region to France, as well as Alsace-Lorraine, which Germany had taken from France in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-1871. Germany lost its Chinese ports. It lost some of its colonial holdings in the Central Pacific. Those went to the Japanese. And two of its African colonies it lost. Finally, Austria, which was not part of the unified German Empire, was also off limits to Germany. Militarily, so that's land. Militarily, the German army was restricted to 100,000 men, no more. Their navy, the German Navy, or the Kriegsmarine, could only have 6 battleships, and they could not make any submarines or U-boats. And they were forbidden a Luftwaffe, or an air force. So land, military. Let's talk about blame. Regarding blame, Germany was held responsible for causing the loss and damage resulting from the Great War. And as far as money, Germany was mandated to pay massive war reparations to the tune of 6.6 billion British pounds. Now, right or wrong, Germany had no intention on abiding by the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler didn't have any intention on abiding by it, I should say, and began secretly rearming Germany during the interwar period. Now, that interwar period is 1919 to 1939. Italy and Japan were also disappointed by their share of the spoils from the Great War and showed little interest in supporting the post-World War I order. Therefore, all the ingredients were in place for a failure of the peace, and another world war was on its way. By the way, does anybody, I want you to think about this, when you hear the term world war, there's a difference between world war or total war and limited war. Captain Brian Brennan wrote an article for Armor magazine, a U.S. Army captain, and he said this about total war, quote, "A total war is an all-embracing imperialist war, waged by all manner of means, not only against enemy armed forces, but against the entire population of a nation, with a view to its complete annihilation. It is in this kind of war that almost every citizen of that nation is mobilized to drive the war effort. Automobile factories are converted to tank factories. Cruise ships become troop transport ships. Food and valuable commodities are rationed, and average citizens are conscripted into the military to become citizen soldiers and sailors. There's no holds barred in a total war. Soldiers are killed on the battlefield as in any conflict, but in total war, commercial shipping gets sunk, factories are reduced to rubble, cities are bombed into oblivion, civilians are killed, and so forth. Limited war, on the other hand, is entirely different. 2 years into the Cold War in 1949, when the Soviet Union entered the nuclear age, the Truman and Johnson administrations were concerned that a war of any kind could risk global thermonuclear annihilation. And so limited war came into vogue during the Cold War period. And in a limited war, the goal is to exact good behavior or to oblige discontinuance of mischief. not to destroy the subject altogether. And so this type of warfare, limited war, was not at all in accordance with what had become America's way of war. In fact, its citizens and its military were appalled by what political scientist Robert Osgood called the, quote, galling but indispensable restraints, end quote, that are encountered in limited war. Now, think about what a limited war in the past 40 to 50 years that the United States has been involved in. Korea, right? Vietnam, the Gulf War. Those are all limited wars. Now, slide 20. Another factor which led to the war was a massive disinformation campaign by the Weimar Republic's bureaucracy. The Weimar Republic was the form of government after the German Empire, which basically dissolved at the end of the Great War. And the Weimar Republic took its place for about a 25-year period. It was a democratic form of government created in 1919 to replace the Hohenzollern dynasty, the German imperial dynasty that had been in place for so long. The Weimar Republic was ruled by President Paul von Hindenburg, a right-winger who was not only a hero of the Great War, but he wanted a return to a one-party authoritarian state. And von Hindenburg persuaded most Germans that the German army was really not to blame for the Great War, and that Germany actually stood undefeated on the field of battle, and it was the Jews and the communists who stabbed Germany in the back. And as a result of this stabbed in the back myth that prevailed across Germany, interwar Germany, a national mood of self-pity and self-indulgence grew and fueled the discontent that a lot of Germans had with the Weimar Republic. One man in particular was especially discontented with the way things had gone for Germany. Next slide. Of course, that man was Adolf Hitler. He was from Austria. He served in the Great War as a dispatch runner in the German army. He came from a humble upbringing. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, later Hitler, changed the name to Hitler, was a customs official. His father died of a lung hemorrhage, and then his mother died of breast cancer at the age of 19, when he was just 19. Hitler thought he would try his luck as an artist. He painted watercolors and tried to sell them off, but nobody would buy them, and he couldn't get into art school. So he joined the army when World War I came along, and during the war he was twice wounded. First time occurred during the Battle of the Somme, which I mentioned a moment ago, when he was hit in the thigh by shell fragments. 2 years later, he was wounded from a mustard gas attack. You have to realize that during the Great War, poison gas was used quite a lot. And while he was recovering in Germany from these mustard gas wounds, the war ended and Germany surrendered. Next slide. The same year that the Weimar Republic was formed, a man by the name of Anton Drexler, a locksmith, founded the DAP, or the German Workers' Party. Drexler was a fanatical right-wing German nationalist. He was also anti-Semitic, anti-capitalist, and anti-Marxism. Drexler's German Workers' Party started having meetings in various beer halls and restaurants throughout Germany. And during a September the 12th meeting in 1919, an audience member started to heckle the speaker and began to yell that Bavaria should secede from Germany and unite with Austria. And during that meeting, Adolf Hitler, who was present at that meeting, stood up and berated the heckler. And Drexler was so impressed with Hitler's audacity and passion and oratory skills that he invited him to join the German Workers' Party. Hitler's considerable oratory and propaganda skills were appreciated by the party leadership. So, with the support of Drexler, Hitler became chief of propaganda for the German Workers' Party in early 1920, and his actions started to transform the party. Next slide. The German Workers' Party had swelled to over 101 members, and Hitler received his membership card as number 555. Interestingly, in Bible numerology, the number 5 is sometimes associated with the number of death. Next slide, 24. He organized their biggest meeting yet, of 2,000 people on 24 February 1920 in a Munich beer hall. And during this meeting, Hitler announced the party's 25-point program and changed the name of the DAP to the NSDAP, or the National Socialist German Workers' Party, commonly known to the rest of the world as the Nazi Party. Hitler designed the party's banner to a swastika in a white circle on a red background. Hitler was later discharged from the army in March of 1920, and that allowed him to begin full-time work for the NSDAP, or the Nazi Party. Slide 25. And I'll tell you what, we're going to stop there. I've got about 30 minutes on this video, and so I don't want these videos to be too lengthy. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to record another video, and we'll pick it up at slide number 25.